Welcome back to Open Mic, everybody. I'm Johnny Kane. A lot of you probably grew up playing ice hockey or maybe even street hockey like I did. It's typically a sport that's associated as a male sport. You know, weren't a ton of opportunities with respect to girl-specific youth leagues or even collegiately not that long ago. But that is changing. Women's professional hockey is growing at a rapid pace, as we've seen with the Professional Women's Hockey League that is still in its infancy, but is expanding. Our next guest, Gavin Velicevic from De La Salle Collegiate High School in Warren, Michigan. Gavin, welcome back to the show.
What's going on, Johnny?
I'll tell you what, man. I used to do a little bit more with the Detroit Red Wings back in the day, and might I say, Darren Elliott, who was one of our analysts, he used to refer to me as Johnny Hockey. But if I'm being honest, it was kind, but maybe not all that accurate. But I do love hockey. I didn't play a ton of ice hockey growing up in Northwest Ohio, but we did play a lot of street hockey. And a lot of my friends obviously grew up, loving the sport. You had a chance to talk with Madison Packer, who recently retired from the Professional Women's Hockey League. What can you tell us about Madison?
She started just like how any other young ice hockey player would start, and started in Birmingham. At 5 years old, she started playing in a boys ice hockey league, travel hockey. Then she got up to Marion High School and then played Little Caesars AAA, a common team around the area with boys in the league. And then that's kind of a minor hockey league they consider it around here. And then she was inducted into the Marion and the Catholic League Hall of Fame, which was a pretty big honor for her, I'm pretty sure. And then she went out to Wisconsin with scholarship to play club ice hockey out there. She helped them win the 2011 state championship, National Collegiate Women's Hockey Tournament. So that was kind of her big thing out in Wisconsin.
Yeah, she can play. You know what I mean? She's got the accolades to go with it. And then Madison Packer, I know she played in the NWHL and the PHF prior to the PWHL, throwing a lot of acronyms at the listeners. But how long has the Professional Women's Hockey League been around?
So the idea came about in the early 2020s, and then in 2023 they got the financial backing, and then finally with 6 teams they started in January 2024.
I know they played actually a game. I know they're due to expand here, I think as early as next season. And there was a PWHL hockey game that was played at Little Caesars Arena not long ago. I had a friend who went to that game. What was your biggest takeaway in talking with Madison? Because as good as she was as an ice hockey player, it's more about her advocacy for affecting change more than just a trip down memory lane about her playing career.
Sure, and I think the biggest takeaway I had was that it's going to be a domino effect. Like she was talking about, for example, if Michigan got a women's hockey team the next year or two, then Michigan State would follow, and then we'd see maybe a little financial backing for a major team, and then you could get professionals in there. But she was saying people got to be more willing to expand and be willing to share. Like she was talking about the Illiches in the building, and they're really just trying to get the contracts in there, and that'd be the most important thing.
Yeah, Madison Packer, advocacy has become a big part of her story. That will be her legacy outside of the arena, affecting change in her community. Here's Gavin Velicevic with Madison Packer.
How's it going, everybody? We're welcoming Madison Packer here from the PWHL, part of a giant professional women's hockey league. She's a prominent figure in sticking up for the women's hockey league rights and all the players' rights. And let's start off right from the top, Madison. You've been a huge women's hockey advocate, and you've been a part of the movement for years. What's the biggest difference you've seen since the beginning to right now where we're at?
Well, I think number one, we have a CBA now. So the players have protections, they have rights. There are certain things in place that ensure that we have benefits, things like that. That wasn't always the case. Seasons 1 and 2, we didn't even have workman's comp in the league, which is something that is absolutely essential. So there's guarantees in place now that protect players. There are guarantees that compensation is going to go up year over year. I think that along with that, the investment group, the Mark Walter Group, they own the Dodgers, Billie Jean King. They're heavily invested in the success and the growth of the league. So that's promising. I think, probably in the next 2, 3, 4 years, you'll start to see these teams get sold off. And then the league is just going to explode even more because you're going to have individual investment in teams, and there's going to be, a vested interest in wanting your team to succeed and be better.
When you started off, like as a kid, how we all do, kind of thinking about what we want to do in sports, were you certain when you started you wanted to do hockey? Was that like I know I want to do this type thing?
Um, yeah, I mean, I always loved playing hockey. It was different then, right? Because there was no women's professional league. So like I think
Yeah.
most of my counterparts, we grew up thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to play in the NHL," which is still has. I mean, Manon Rayon played in a game as a goalie, but it's just not a realistic goal. Like the women aren't going to play in the NHL, but they don't have to anymore. So for me, it was always I wanted to be on the national team, be an Olympian, but even growing up, you had to go to a game to be able to see it. So like I went to the Salt Lake City Olympics in 2002. That was the only way I could see like high level women's hockey because it wasn't on television. So I think that's a big difference now too, is that, young girls have the ability to grow up wanting to be Hillary Knight, Madison Packer, Kendall Coyne. They don't have to grow up wanting to be Brad Marchand or the male equivalent of what they are able to see now.
Like you were talking about young athletes and being inspired a little bit. What would you say to them that are kind of dreaming, maybe get to the PWHL, especially our women listeners here? What would you think is your best piece of advice getting up to the professional league or even the collegiate level?
Yeah, I think that one, to keep having fun. I mean, like when you're in something, it seems like everyone is succeeding and everyone's doing what you want to do. It's really hard to make it to that level, one. But if you have a goal and you're willing to sacrifice and stick to it, it's attainable, right? Because the league exists and it's there. I think the biggest thing, especially, playing a predominantly male sport, you're always going to have people tell you that you can't do something. And it's usually people who are jealous that they're watching you do what they can't. So I think just if you have a goal and you have a dream, stick to it, and um, don't let the negative energy and the people telling you that you can't do something prevent you from trying.
Awesome. You've obviously had a ton of success not only at Wisconsin or in the PWHL, and you've been a huge advocate off of the ice, from speaking up for players' rights to mental health, all of that. Why has advocacy become such a large part of your career?
Yeah, I think for me, like I learned once I got a bigger platform on the professional level, like the ability that I had to make a difference outside of the arena. And that was my legacy as a player was going to be far more impactful if I could affect change in my community, not just on the fun side of the glass. Um, and unfortunately, I experienced some loss in my personal life. I've lost friends to drug overdose, to suicide. My wife has struggled with her mental health. So it's just things that have become more and more common and gotten closer and closer to home. I have a lot of friends whose kids don't have access to sport in the way that they should, and I feel like I have a platform and the ability to speak out about those things. And I think that at the end of the day, regardless of what you do for a living, we're all human beings and we're all impacted and affected by the same things. And I think that the more we normalize conversations that are difficult to have, the more comfortable everyone is in having that conversation in their own community. And so that's kind of where it started. And I think I found that the more I talked about things and the more welcoming we made our arenas and the more we leaned into groups that maybe weren't always as seen or as heard, it made playing more enjoyable. It made our locker room more enjoyable. Our team was more successful because it was just a much lighter like air in the room. And so I think that uh, you know in talking with my wife, like that's the most important part of sport is the ability to make an impact on someone's life. Like at the end, like my career, I obviously retired. Like looking back, I can maybe remember a couple goals that I scored that were like really cool, and obviously I remember winning like the big championships. But the things that stick out more in my mind are like the community events that we did, or the games where like fans came up afterwards and they were so excited for whatever the initiative was that we were doing. And so at the end of the day, like, that's the most rewarding part of the job.
That's awesome. Quick fun one. You've played with a ton of players over your time. If you had the chance to create your top 5, top 6, whatever, in a lineup, what would be your ultimate lineup for the pwhl, either with players right now or players you played with? What would be that ultimate lineup?
Ooh. I guess I'll go right now. But I've got to throw Rebecca Russo in there because she's a good friend of mine, played with me on the Riveters, and wouldn't forgive me if I didn't give her a shout out. So I'll go me, Russo, Gwyneth Phillips in net, Kayla Barnes on D, Megan Keller on D, and maybe Sarah Fillier.
Awesome. That's your top 5, top 6 type
Yeah.
shifting on the line?
Yeah.
Awesome. And then we see women's hockey is really growing. It's like you said, we're getting more investment in the sport, and even people from investors like in the Dodgers and trying to get more private investment with sold out crowds or more ownership. And more young girls are obviously picking up the sport. Where do you see women's hockey moving to in the future?
I think initially just start filling the buildings that we have. Hockey is interesting and unique in that there are a lot of barriers to entry from the grassroots level. It's a very expensive sport to play. It's not super accessible dependent on where you live. So there's a huge burden on the people at the top to continue to make the game accessible at the grassroots level so that girls want to continue to play, because we need that pipeline to continue. You're seeing on the NHL side, viewership is down a little bit, enrollment numbers are down a little bit. Fortunately, women's hockey is booming right now, but because we have this successful, awesome thing happening with the women's league. So I think that the girls at the top need to continue to give back to the game and develop young players. And then, as long as that continues to happen and the pipeline stays full, like, I would love to see more college teams pop up. I think the University of Michigan, it's ridiculous that they don't have a women's team. I think once they get a team, Michigan State will get a team. But the hardship is it just hasn't been as popular a sport because of the accessibility component. But once once that happens and some of those schools start to get teams, then ideally you would have more women's pro teams. Like, you could easily right now have 8 to 10 teams in the women's pro league because there's enough talent right now to substantiate that, but there just isn't the demand for the viewership. So they need to fill the buildings that exist and then continue to expand.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it a lot, Madison, for your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, again on Sportscaster, Madison Packer here with us. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, really amazing to see how different athletes, once the playing careers are done, what they decide to do, after they hang them up. And for someone like Madison Packer, obviously an advocate in a big way for not just women's professional hockey, but, women's sports in general. And it's cool to know that she's a Birmingham, Michigan native and is doing big things, continues to do big things. So we appreciate her time today on sportscaster.com. And also Gavin Velicevic, really solid interview that he did with Madison. Also want to thank Lyric Sloan from Michigan State University for catching up with Lorenzo Pinilli from the Michigan State golf team, who's coming off a fabulous performance at the Michigan Am earlier this month. Giovanni Micheri from Oakland University. Great commentary on that landmark legal case as now the NCAA agreeing to pay $2.8 billion in back pay to former and current college athletes. And our thanks to Matt O'Brien and also Carter Lutz with the NBA draft taking place later tonight in Brooklyn. Some commentary on how that thing may shake out and how the future of the NBA may look in the coming weeks and months ahead. So we appreciate everybody tuning in this week. Fun show. Hope you learned a few things, and we'll continue to bring you some compelling storylines as we do this every week on Wednesday nights from 8 to 9 here on WJR. Until next time, I'm Johnny Kane. We say thanks for listening.